Ilaria Allegrozzi is the Senior Central Africa Researcher at Human Rights Watch, focusing primarily on countries such as Cameroon. She joins us now via Skype from Rome in Italy. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Such a sad and tragic story. I suppose it speaks to what can only be described as an escalation in violence in Cameroon.
Absolutely. It is tragic. It's a horrific attack, and we are all shocked. We still don't know who carried out this brutal crime. We only know that gunmen stormed this school in Kumba in the southwest on Saturday morning and opened fire on these secondary school children who were there for catch-up classes. As you might know, since now 3 years, all Mondays are ghost town in the Anglophone regions because separatist fighters have imposed all population to stay home, to shut down activities, and also to shut down schools. So these children were in school for catch-up classes. Right after the attack, the government blamed separatist fighters, and in turn, the separatist fighters blamed government soldiers. So it has been a blaming game, but what is clear that this really sets a new dangerous precedent in this crisis in Cameroon. It is a new law and in a crisis which has already caused so much suffering and so much death and displacement.
Have we seen children being targets like this before?
Not really. This is the first time that we see such a awful and despicable attack. In the past, armed separatists have targeted children for going to school, have assaulted teachers, have kidnapped hundreds of students, but also government forces have been responsible for serious human rights abuses and have killed civilians, including children. But we have never seen such an attack before.
What have the authorities said about this? Because, you know, citizens look to their government to protect them from this kind of harm. Is it that the country is just too big, there's just no way of managing this kind of thing?
Well, as I said, there has been a blaming game since the attack occurred. The authorities, soon after the attack, blamed separatist fighters for this crime, and leaders of the major separatist groups have instead accused the government. The situation is very tense at the moment, and in general, the English-speaking regions are so badly affected by the violence that definitely there's no place for children at the moment in these regions.
And this area where these children were killed, tell us a little bit more about what's been happening there. Has it been particularly vulnerable to this kind of attack, even though they did escalate it to children? But were there violence and attacks taking place in that area?
Absolutely. Violence has been rife in these two regions since now 3 years. Abuses have been committed against civilians by both government forces and armed separatists. The humanitarian situation is dire, and violence has resulted into multiple displacement of populations in the two regions and beyond. There are currently 700,000 internally displaced people in both the northwest and southwest regions, and 50,000 refugees in Nigeria. Over 3 million people are affected by the crisis and in need of humanitarian aid. The food security situation is precarious. Almost all schools are shut down. Only 12% of schools in the two regions are open at the moment. Humanitarian workers struggle to deliver assistance as they have been targeted themselves. So you see, it's a very concerning and worrisome situation which deserves more attention from the international community.
All right, so there is the blame game playing out, but it does seem that there must be some people who, within these movements, the separatist movements, and also perhaps some rogue soldiers, because it was just a few weeks ago that we saw 4 soldiers sentenced to 10 years for killing a woman, I'm told. So why are they breaking away from their discipline? If the separatist cause is just in their eyes, why the violence? Has that been explained?
Well, I think there is no justification for the killings of innocent children. I think this attack is just a grim reminder of the crisis in Cameroon's horrific toll on children. Since 3 years, children have been targeted, kept out of school, displaced. They have really suffered disproportionately from this ongoing violence. And I think until all parties to this crisis come to a solution and exercise restraint, children will continue to pay the highest price in the Anglophone regions.
What can the international community do? We can raise the issue in terms of awareness, but it almost sounds as if we need quite a large UN force in the region.
I think it is high time for the UN, in particularly for the UN Security Council, to take a closer look at Cameroon, to confront, to acknowledge the scale of the violence in the Anglophone regions, and do more to address this crisis. I don't think it's enough to issue declarations condemning the violence, condemning this attack, the latest attack in Kumba. More needs to be done to make sure that Cameroon is discussed at the highest level. So, for example, the UN Security Council should add Cameroon at its formal agenda as a crucial item to be discussed to address the serious human rights abuses committed in the past 3 years in the Anglophone regions.
Organizations such as yours, Human Rights Watch, have done great work to raise the alarm. What have they been telling you in response when you bring these stories to them?
Well, we have been trying to shed light to some of the major human rights issues across the country, alongside with human rights organizations based in Cameroon, which are doing an excellent job in pressing the government and pressing for accountability. But let me tell you that it is not easy for human rights groups, for civil society to operate in Cameroon and to work on Cameroon. Independent journalists, human rights activists have been intimidated, locked up, they've been harassed, they've been prevented from reporting on the crisis in the Anglophone regions. My organization, for example, has been denied access to the country last year. So it is a repressive environment, and it is worrying. But I don't think that the strategy of the government of keeping everyone in the dark will work.
All right. So, again, I keep wanting to go to the president and the people in power and in authority, and their job is to manage the country. Has the president said anything about how they're going to solve these kinds of crises?
Yeah, last year President Biya convened a national dialogue to address the crisis. This dialogue has been widely criticized for not being inclusive enough, and also from a human rights point of view, from not discussing key issues around accountability for military abuses. Most recently, government officials held peace talks with the leaders of one major separatist group in Yaoundé, in the capital, and this gave some hope for a resolution to the crisis. There was also a call for a COVID-19 ceasefire in March by another separatist group operating across the Anglophone regions. Another sign that, another hope for putting an end to the violence, but unfortunately nothing has been able to stop the violence so far.
All right, you've mentioned the challenges that children are facing at the moment. I'm just wondering, what kind of humanitarian situation is playing out generally in these regions. I would imagine getting aid becomes difficult. Even your work becomes challenging to try and go into these places to be able to find out what's really going on and spread the word.
Absolutely. As I said, working in Cameroon and on Cameroon is very challenging. Access to the Anglophone regions is restricted because of the violence, but also because authorities have been preventing independent and international scrutiny and oversight of what's happening in the Anglophone regions. So access is restricted, even for humanitarian workers who are at the front line trying to deliver life-saving assistance for the population in need. Access has been blocked by both government forces and separatists. Humanitarian workers have been targeted, assaulted, their material has been looted, they've been kidnapped. So you see a situation where it's dangerous to work.
Ilaria, thank you very, very much indeed. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I think we probably need to keep on having these conversations and make sure that those that have the power to do and act can hear, and we force them one way or another to take action. But thanks so much indeed for giving us some insights on what's happening on the ground there. Thank you.